Well, welcome everyone. As you know, the countdown is typically the lead-in to all of our really fancy community live streams we've been doing over the last year, and this will be no exception. Hundreds of people joining us online this morning to join Riley Morgan, a technical adoption engineer from our advanced customer enablement team, to give you another hands-on to all of the great things you can do inside the AI and data products platform, Domo. I am the community director here at Domo and excited to, again, bring you another one of these sessions. We're going to really focus in on creating data products in Domo today. Obviously, as you know, you've read the description, you've signed up for this session. Riley's going to do some deep dives on some powerful app integrations using Domo's App Studio. I have seen a little bit of this. It is incredible. You're not going to want to miss it. And he's going to really kind of streamline that process during this session. So we're glad you're here. Please let us know where you're from, where you're joining from. Excited to see all of those comments come in. I was clicking a little bit of them in the intro so we can get an idea. We have gone international officially. I see Canada. I see Mexico. And there's my good friend, Teresa, from my hometown, Indianapolis. And I've been spending the week inside the Domo offices, always energized by being around the team. And obviously I'm here right now, but getting ready to get on a flight, headed back to home. Thank you for joining us from Hawaii and from Arizona. We really appreciate that. Lots of friends in here ready to get it started with DDX recently, and they are incredible. So I'm sure we're going to dive into some really great activations for you as well, Will. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Keep the comments coming as Riley goes through this session. He is going to hopefully dive into some of those comments and questions you have, because this is a hands-on session. And we've been talking a lot about what these are. We've done about 3 of them, I believe, with the ACE team, the Advanced Customer Enablement team. And by doing these, we've really had a chance to get to know you as a customer, to get to know how we can make our product better, but also how to engage with you on our platform. So continue to sign up, continue to enjoy some of these offerings. Our next session, I always like to pump this up front. We're going to promote this little bad boy. Our next session with Dan Hendrickson, one of our favorites here, is going to be happening on January 30th at 2 p.m. Leave the screen up for just a few seconds. You can scan this QR code and sign up for this upcoming session. What will we be doing? We're going to try to empower you for every role and making sure those roles have exactly what they need when they need it. A lot of this is going to be delivering bespoke AI-enabled experiences, so you can see some real-world examples on how top companies deliver tailored experiences. Dan's got a fun session coming up. We've been talking about it for the last few days. Excited to get that, and I will put the direct link in the chat so you can get that as well. Without further ado, Riley, it might be a good idea for those that have not joined us in the past, or those that are kind of new to the ACE experience, talk a little bit about advanced customer enablement and a little bit about what you're going to talk about today, and then I'll let you jump right into the session.
Yeah, sounds great, Eddie. Once again, thanks for having us on. The ACE team loves these webinars, loves interacting with the community. And really our program, as in the name, Advanced Customer Enablement, we love working with our customers to help them understand how they can leverage the different Domo products to solve really cool business use cases, make sure that they're aware of the best practices and all the cool tools that are available in Domo, and co-build out these different projects together and do solution designs, really interactive. And that's really what we're focused on is customer enablement and getting users to adopt and use the great tool that we have here at Domo.
I love it. All right, Riley, I'm going to get out of the way. As usual, no one needs to stare at my face while you do all the good work from behind the scenes. Take it away. Excited to see what you have planned for us.
Sounds good. I'm going to share my screen here, and let's jump into it. So today we have a really interactive session where we're going to walk through how you can build actionable data products with Domo. And we're going to focus on a particular use case in this session, which is a facility management use case, where we're going to learn how you can do task assignment and real-time process tracking via the Domo platform. Now, if you're a part of an organization that doesn't have facility management, if this doesn't seem like a use case that matches what you're responsible for, what you do on the day-to-day, don't worry. These tools that we're going to work with are very applicable to all sorts of different use cases. And the idea of building solutions on Domo is something I think we can all learn and try to apply to our day-to-day, and how we leverage this really powerful tool. And so I want to quickly talk through this use case that we're going to build out today. Summit Ridge Medical Center is a fictitious company, but they really deal with a problem that is common across a lot of our customers. They have multiple locations that they need to manage, and they have a facility maintenance team that handles all the different requests that come through. And the way that they're tracking this and keeping note of everything that they're doing is via text message. Maybe it's through Teams or Slack, but there's no really good source of truth and source of understanding what's coming in and who's responsible for what. And so what they were seeing is an increase in time to completion for a lot of these tasks, that they're falling behind schedule. And because of this, it led to unsafe conditions and an increased operational expenses. And while Summit Ridge is a fictitious company, this is a real problem that people have been facing. I've actually implemented the solution that we're going to see in just a second with half a dozen companies in the last 2 to 3 months. And they've been using this in production and finding great value out of this tool. And the tools that we're going to use in this session are ones that all sorts of Domo customers are using to solve real-world business problems. And so with that kind of problem overview, I want to quickly walk through the solution that we're going to build today. And so what I'm showing here is an App Studio app in Domo. And how this is being used is it's a facility management maintenance portal. So we get to direct all of the facility management team and managers to one centralized location. And on this landing page, they're able to see this task and queue center, where they can have access to all the active tasks that are assigned to each individual. Now, as an individual contributor, I can come in here and see the tasks that are assigned to me. I can open up these tasks and see different notes on where the location is, the type of maintenance type, priority, and then it will prompt me to enter some sort of information or data about me completing this task. So really makes it a clean and easy interface for me to see what I'm responsible for. If I want to submit a new task to be completed, I can tab over and leverage the Domo forms to input data and submit a task to be completed. And the really cool thing about this form is that behind the scenes, we're going to be using Domo workflows to automate who gets assigned this task, and then adding this task to our queue in Domo. So really powerful front end here. The great thing about all this being in Domo is that not only do we have these really powerful tools that we can use, but all this data that we're capturing is being stored in Domo in a data set, just like we're used to. So now we can start to build this really powerful downstream reporting to be able to see how many active critical tasks are still open, how many tasks do we have to work on, average time to completion. And as a manager or as a team, we can see how effective are we and what do we need to do to be more efficient with the resources we have, going down to the row level granularity here. So really powerful tool. Like I said, I've helped a number of customers implement this, and they're using this on the day-to-day. What I want to do in this session is I want to get started working with you, teaching you how you can build something, a solution like this, and apply it to your business. So with that, in the chat, there should be a link to a publicly available Domo dashboard. And this Domo dashboard has all the assets that we're going to use in today's session. So we have a data set that we're going to copy and paste in, a little bit of code. And when I say code, don't start to freak out. This is going to be really simple, and we'll walk through all of it. But all the resources that you're going to need in this session will be in that chat. So once you open up that, I also encourage you to open up an instance of Domo that you can work in. And we're going to get hands-on in building out this solution together. So if you can open up an instance of Domo, Once you have that open, I'd encourage you to navigate over to the Data tab. And we're going to start by connecting a data set that we're going to work with for this solution. So when you're there, click on Connect Data. We're going to upload a spreadsheet here. And at the bottom right, there's going to be this spot where you can create a web form. If you can do that, if it opens up to this blank page, don't worry, you can click the refresh button here. Sometimes it just takes a second to load. And so here we have our web form. This is similar to like a Google Sheet or Excel document. And what I want you to do is we're going to open up the resource dashboard. And we have this table here. And if you can click from the top left of this table down to the bottom right and highlight all of these different cells. And I'm just going to refresh this. We're going to highlight all these cells, and we're going to copy that. And in our web form, in the top left header, we're going to edit this and paste those cells. And having a little bit of technical difficulty, so hopefully this isn't what's happening on your side. All right. So we should have, and please, if you're having these issues with copying and pasting that data over, please put that in the chat and we can figure out another way to get that data in your instance. For now, we're going to assume that everything's working unless Eddie jumps in here. But we have this table of data inside of Domo. And this first one is going to be our maintenance underscore type. And we want to adjust a couple things about this. So here we have our maintenance types. So the type of activities we might be involved in, the teams responsible, the employee responsible for that task. And then we have this Domo ID, and we're also going to add a column here for email. And what I want you to do is under this Domo ID, if you can, let's open up a second instance of Domo, and we're going to kind of jump between two tabs of Domo throughout this webinar. So keep this open. And I would encourage you to click on your profile picture at the top right and click on My Profile. Now, in the profile, in the URL, there is this number here, and this number is the Domo ID for your user. I want you to copy that number, and we're going to paste this in for the Domo ID for our users here. Now, in the ideal state, we'd have the Domo ID for all the maintenance employees that are working for our company here. But we want to make sure that we can validate the task getting assigned and retrieve those notifications. And so we're just going to paste our number in there. Similarly, if you can put your email address in the email column, I'm going to do that. And if you want to copy and paste these all the way down, you can hover at the bottom right corner, and your cursor will turn into a little plus icon. And you can drag and drop that all the way down to the bottom. So you can copy and paste it into each cell, or you can drag and duplicate all of those values. Once you have that data in there, let's give our data set a name. I'm going to call it Facility Management Mapping Table. And use autocorrect here. And save and continue. Now, we're going to use this table as a way to help our workflow, or our business automation tool, to determine what individual on our team is responsible for what tasks. So having this table really will help us as we start to orchestrate who's responsible for what in this solution. We have this data set saved. We're going to open up our workflow engine here. So under the More tab, at the bottom right, there is this workflow section. And in our workflows, we want to create a new business automation or workflow. So we'll click on the orange button here and create a blank workflow. And we can name this facility management workflow. Now, when we create this blank workflow, you'll notice that we have kind of this blank canvas that we get to work with. And on the right-hand side is going to be where we configure our different action tiles. And then on the left-hand side, we have what we call our variable list, which is where we get to save data to variables throughout our workflow process. And to start out a workflow, there are two main ways to kick off a workflow. You can have a workflow start at a particular cadence based off of a timer. So whether that's once a day, every 30 minutes, every 15 minutes, or you can use this general start, which allows us to kick off a workflow via an alert or a form entry or trigger it manually. And so for our workflow today that we're going to build, we're going to use this general start. And before we start to configure out,
hey Riley, sorry.
Yeah.
It felt like a good place to stop here. I think we had some people join a little bit late. Okay. They were kind of asking, where do I find the workflow? Was that specifically through some of the things that you were doing, or is that in the embed?
The data set or this workflow section? The
workflow, I believe. How do we get to the workflow screen? Still trying to catch up from the copy and paste issue. There was some solutions with the copy and paste. It looks like Control C, Control V is typically what's solving that for a lot of folks in the chat. The mouse copy, I think, was having some issues for some users, so they're a little bit behind.
Perfect. So thanks for bringing that up, Eddie. To get to the workflows for those that were working on the data set connection, apologies for that. If you click on the More tab at the top of your screen, and then the Workflows tool is going to be at the bottom right of the More section. And when you click on the workflows, it'll bring you to a list of all the workflows built in your instance. And what we're going to want to do is click on the orange button at the top right to create a new workflow. And we're going to build that from scratch. So we're going to use this blank workflow template. So I'll give everyone just a second to make sure that's set up and that we're all on the same page here.
Yeah, I think we're good now, Riley. I think there are some folks, if they're not seeing that, workflows is a feature that needs to be enabled on your instance to get to this. So obviously we don't want to deter people to be like, well, I don't have it, so I'm out of here. If you don't have it, stick around, watch what it does, because every time I see workflows, I lose my mind. So, and I try to, scream at whoever's in charge to make sure it's turned on for me. I would love for other folks to do that as well. So definitely something to stick around for if you don't have that turned on in your instance. But yeah, great call out here, Dan, on the stream. It does depend if that's turned on your instance.
Yep. And thanks for that call out. Yeah. If you don't have workflows on, would love to encourage everyone to still stay in and watch to see the cool solutions that you can build here. And then also reach out to your account team to talk about how you can get workflows enabled so that you can start building with this really powerful tool. So jumping back into the build of this solution here, before we start to configure each of our tiles, I want to quickly walk through kind of the step-by-step process and wireframe of what our solution is going to look like. So if we think about a facility management use case and the steps that our individuals and our workers are going to go through as they complete these tasks, we know that to start off, an individual might be walking around and they'll see a task that needs to be completed. And so they might want to document this via a form and capture the task requirements. And so on this start tile here, let's change the title and say submit maintenance request. So in this initial step, we're going to prompt a user to submit the maintenance request. Let's add a second action via that plus icon. And once we have a maintenance request that needs to be completed, the next logical thing is that we need to determine who should complete this task. So we need to find employee responsible. And we can title these different tiles so that we know what needs to be filled out in each step of this process. So after we find the employee responsible, it's important that we start to document what's happening throughout this process. So we might want to save the information to a data set. So we'll take a step in here to save everything that's happened to this point to a data set, so we have transparency and process tracking in this process. After we save that information, we then want to assign the task to someone and notify them that they're responsible to complete some sort of activity. So we're going to use the next tile to assign the task. And after we assign the task, once we move on to this next step, that would mean that they have completed the task, which means that we should probably update our data. And then that task is now complete, so we can end our workflow. So super simple process, only five steps here to configure to begin with. But I think walking through a process step by step really helps us understand what's required and what do we need to be able to accomplish this process. So now that we know what this workflow is going to look like, let's jump back to our first tile here. And we noted that we needed to submit some sort of maintenance request. And so we can prompt a user to submit a form via the workflow, and we can configure that form at the bottom right of our configuration panel where it says Customize Start Form. So let's open up this Customize Start Form. And you'll notice that this is going to be a form building experience. So we can start to add our questions and customize how this form looks and what data that we're going to capture. So first, when we open up this form, let's give it a title. We'll say Submit Task Form. And then let's start to add our questions for this form. The first thing that we might want to know about this maintenance task is, where is it? Where does an employee need to go to complete this task? And so for a question, let's say we want to know the location of the task. And with these questions, we can change the submission type and the data type that we're going to be working with. For this initial question, I think short answer will be a great option for the user to submit the response. And so we can go on to our next question. And that next question is probably going to be, what is the maintenance request being requested? So what's the maintenance type that we need to work with? So let's type in maintenance type. And instead of a short answer for this one, we want users to choose from a predefined list that we have. And so let's select a single choice dropdown. And you'll notice that we can either hard code in answers or options for our users to select from. Or off to the right, we have this ability to change the list options from user defined. And we want to change this to be dataset defined. And so what this allows us to do is kind of automate this process of where our questions going to pull from for the answers. So what I want us to do here is, under the data set, let's select the data set that we just uploaded in our instance. And so here I'm going to choose the facility maintenance webinar. And then the column that I want us to use is the maintenance type. And so what this is going to do is it's going to create a list of options for all the unique different maintenance types in our data set here. After we configure this, we'll have one last question just to keep this really simple. and we're going to ask our users, what is the priority of this task? And instead of short answer, let's select a single choice radio button. And let's hard code in our answer. So we're going to have an option for high priority, one for medium, and one for low. All right, so at this point, we have our form that our users are going to submit. If we want to see what this is going to look like in our App Studio app, we can preview it here. So we can see we have the short answer for our location. We'll have a single choice dropdown for our maintenance type that comes from our data set. And then we have our single choice radio button here for our priority. So let's save this form. And now that we've saved those questions in that form, we need to do something with these responses. And this is where variables in our workflows come into play. So these answers that our users submit, we now need to set these answers to a variable in this workflow. And so in this configuration panel off to the right, I want you to click on each of these questions and click on Create Variable and Map. And you'll notice as I do this, we see our new variables show up in our variables list here. And what this is doing is it's saving those answers that our users are submitting and saving those answers to these variables that we can leverage in upcoming steps. So at this point, we have our form set up. We've saved our answers to our variables. And now we can move on to the next portion of our workflow. And this is where we need to find the employee responsible for the task being requested. So on this next tile, what I want you to do is let's click on this define tile. And we have this, there's a number of different ways that we could do this, but we have this function called query table. And so let's click on this query table service task or option. And what this function will allow us to do is it will allow us to look at a data set in our instance and find a row or a value from that data set based on a SQL query. And if you're not familiar with SQL, that's all right. We're going to use our resource document in here to help us with this. But what I want you to do is click on the SQL query editor in the side panel here. And this is going to launch a mode for us to the top of this. It wants us to select a data set for us to look at. And so you can click on the drop down and we're going to choose a custom data set. And we're going to, once again, grab the data set that we uploaded at the beginning of the webinar. And so here I've got my facility maintenance webinar table. I'm going to select that and click OK. And now this is where we get to write our SQL query to find the person responsible for this task. And so what I want you to do here, have that tab or that link open from the beginning. I want you to tab back over to our resource documents here. And underneath the mapping table or the mapping data set, we have a section here labeled SQL code. And so if you can copy the SQL statement from this section, and we'll jump back over to our workflow, and we're just going to paste that into our SQL editor here. Now, what this SQL statement is doing is it's going to select all the rows from our data set where the maintenance type is equal to the maintenance type that was submitted in the form. Now, to be able to pass in that variable and that response from the form, we need to delete what's in these single quotes here. And we want to inject a variable into our SQL here. So where your cursor is at, we are going to now select a variable. And we're going to select the maintenance type. And we're going to insert that variable in our SQL statement. One thing to check is to make sure that this blue variable object is in between single quotes, because we need to make sure that it's registered as a text. And once you have that variable added to your SQL statement, we're going to run this, this statement here. It wants us to give a default value for our maintenance type. And so let's type in pest control, which is one of the options from our data set. And when we click OK, we're going to see the preview response from our statement here. And so here we have rows for our maintenance type, team responsible, and then this field right here is what we really want, and that's the employee name for the person who's going to be responsible for that task. So now that we have this row of data, we can now define the output that we want to save. And then once again, this is saving to that variable so that we can use this in the next upcoming steps in our workflow. And so here we get a check that the data types are correct for all of these values. And so looking at this, we have our maintenance type, which is going to be a text field, our text data type, our team responsible, employee. And the one that I would like you to change is we have this Domo ID, which comes through as a number, which is correct, but we're going to use this as a person. So we want to identify this as a Domo user that we can use to assign these tasks to later on. So we're going to change the Domo ID data type to a person up here in the top right. Once we do that, everything else looks good to go. So we're going to save and exit out of that modal. And what you'll see here now in our configuration panel has changed since we first opened it. We now have these output options, which is the result, and then all the data that's coming from our SQL statement in this function. And so what I want you to do is click on the result drop down here, and we're going to create and map this variable. And by doing so, what we're doing is we're creating this object called result. And this object is kind of like a data container. And inside of this container, we get to store all of these individual variables or values in this container. So within result, we have our Domo user, their email address, their name, and all this other information about them. And so this is where we get to move on to our next step. So recapping our first two actions in the workflow, we have created a form for our users to submit a maintenance request. We then save that information to our variables. And then we identified who's responsible for that maintenance request and now have their information in our workflow. So at this point, we noted that we want to save this information to a data set so that we can do reporting and have full transparency into what's happening in this process. And so in this next tile, this is where we get to use what's probably a new tool for a lot of us on the call here, but it is a tool called AppDB. And AppDB is this way of storing data in Domo. And particularly, it's useful when the data that we're storing is going to have updates and changes made to it on a fairly regular basis. And that's what's going to be happening in this flow here. We're going to input this information, but then we want to update the status and who's responsible and all this additional context as a person completes this task. And so this AppDB tool will allow us to really work with saving this data in our instance and providing proper updates throughout the task completion. And so what I want us to do here is we're going to open up that second tab of Domo, and we're going to open up our AppDB tool inside of our Domo instance. So keeping your workflow still open. In a new tab, what I'd like to ask is if we can open up our More tab. And under the More tab, we have this section called our Asset Library. And our AppDB is going to be found in this Asset Library tool. In our Asset Library, it's going to open up, and you're going to be able to see different apps that have been built here. We're not going to worry about these, but instead, we're going to open up this AppDB admin page, which is going to be found in the left nav bar. And what we want to do is we want to create a new collection or a new place for us to store this data around our solution here. And so let's click on the create a collection, and let's name our collection facility management dataset. And then click create. This will launch you into this AppDB editing experience. Some it might launch to this configuration page. If you landed on this Data Explorer page, we're not going to spend any time here, but we'll want to navigate over to the configuration tab. And in our configuration tab, we want to set up what data we want to capture with our AppDB data. And we can do that via this schema builder tool here. And so what I want us to do is we're going to start adding columns of data that we want to store throughout this process. So let's click on Add Column. And if we think about the data that we captured via that form, we know that we want to store information on the location. And that location is going to be a string, so that is all good. We also want to store the maintenance type. And I'm going to put everything in camel case, so the first letter is going to be lowercase. The second letter, or the second word, is going to start with an uppercase. And then we also have the priority. Now, in that next step of the workflow, or that second tile, we captured the person assigned to the task. So we also want to document that as the assigned person. And I want us to think about later on in our workflow process, what data do we want to capture from the person who completes the task? This might change, from time to time, but we will probably want to understand when did they start the task. And so what was the start time? And we're going to change this to be date time. We also probably want to know what was the end time for the task. And we're going to change this to date time as well. And then we also might want to know some sort of completion notes given by the user who completed the task. This might be information on the tools or resources that they used, reasons for why it took them so long or so little to complete it. And so we're going to say completion notes here. And that's going to be a string as well. So we have these 7 columns or 7 data points that we want to store in our AppDB collection. And once we have all 7 of these added to our schema, let's click on Save. And we're going to sync or turn the sync enabled on, meaning that we're going to write this data to a data set in Domo. All right. So now that we have this AppDB configuration set up, what I want us to do is tab back over to our workflow section. And we're going to write this data to our new AppDB collection that we created. So in this third tile, I want us to click on Define, and we're going to look for a function within our workflow services that talks with and works with our AppDB tool. And so that's going to be found under our Domo automation functions, where we can click on View More. And we could search for AppDB in here, but because it's sorted alphabetically, we can see that AppDB is right in the first couple categories. And what we want to do is we want to create a new document in our AppDB storage layer. So we're going to do this via the create AppDB document from JSON string, which should be the second function down from the top. So once again, we're going to search for the Domo automated functions. It's going to be under the AppDB collections. And then we're going to select the second function from the top, create AppDB document from JSON string. Here, it'll let you know what are the inputs required for the function and what are the outputs that you should expect. And then if you wanted an example of how it's used, you can see that. But what we're going to do is we're going to click this Add Automation. And now in our configuration tab off to the right, we can start to fill out the necessary information to use this, this service or this function. So with this, we can see that our inputs for this service is that we need our collection ID and a JSON string. So our collection ID is something that is created when we make our AppDB document or our AppDB collection. And we can find that by going back to our AppDB tool. And in the URL, there is a set of numbers and letters here. And this is going to be our collection ID. So everything from our AppDB in between the collection is going to be your collection ID. So we're going to want to copy this and go back to our workflow. And in the collection ID, we're going to click on the drop down. And instead of wiring it up to one of the variables that we have here, we are going to select a custom input. And we're going to paste our AppDB collection ID in this custom text area. And click OK. So what this has done is it has allowed us to wire in our AppDB collection that we want our data to go to. And then the next thing we need to do is write a JSON string. Now, JSON strings might be new to some people as well. Don't worry, this is where we're going to use our documentation via the link again. And I have written out a AppDB document JSON string that we're going to copy and paste for our session today. So once you grab that document or that string from the link, let's go back to our JSON string, and we're going to do the same thing where we click on custom, and we paste in our string here from our embedded dashboard. Now, before clicking OK, you'll notice that we have some empty strings with nothing in them. And what we need to do here is we need to insert our variables. So in our location or in our variables, we want to select the location and insert those in between the quotes. And we want to do this for each of the following data types that we want to write to our data set. So we're going to do this with the maintenance type, the priority, and lastly, we're going to insert the variable for our employee name, which is going to be labeled result.employee_name. Once we have this, we should have 4 variables in our JSON string here, and we can then click OK. So those were the 2 inputs. Now we can start to wire up our outputs. So as a result from this function, we can click on the document and create variable and map. And similar to what happened in our previous step with the SQL, we are going to create an object with all of these variables nested inside that we can use at any given point. After we create our collection, we will want to sync this to a data set. And we can do this really easily with another tile. So in between the assign task and create AppDB, let's click on the plus icon here. And we're going to click on define. And similar to where we found our AppDB documents functions, we're going to view more and click on AppDB collection functions. And towards the very bottom of this, you'll notice a function called sync collection. And what this does is it force syncs the data that is in our AppDB collection to a Domo data set that you can see in the data center. And so we're going to add this automation here. And sometimes it will pre-fill this for you. So you might have already had this filled out. If it hasn't, been filled out for you, what you're going to want to do is you're going to put the document.dataStore ID, which we get from our previous step, as the value for our data store ID. And then for our success output, we're going to create and map a new variable. All right, so now we've saved this data. We have it written to a data set. This is where we start to get into the actionable part of assigning a task to a user in our app. And so to do this, we can click on Define, and there's going to be this section called User Tasks. And user tasks allow us to prompt a user to fulfill some sort of activity, whether that's via email or via form. And for our solution here, we're going to do this via a form. And so by clicking on that user task in the form one, you'll notice that we have our configuration panel here, which wants us to select a queue to add this task to, as well as assign it to a user and create some sort of form output. So with this, what we want to do here is we need to create a queue to place these tasks in. And so in our other Domo tab that we have open, we're going to be done with AppDB now for the day. And what I want you to do is under the More section again, we are going to open up this Task Center section here. And this Task Center is where we can manage all the activities that are being assigned to our team members and set up a queue for all of those to be organized and cleanly formatted. And so inside of Task Center, I want you to click on the Manage Queues button at the top right. And then we're going to create a new queue to place these tasks in. So we're going to name this queue Facility Management. And then you can add a description. We're just going to click on New Queue here. And it will pop up in the list of queues in your instance. Now, it is ready to go right now, although there are some additional settings that you can configure. So if you want to share this out and this solution out with other team members, you're going to want to give them access to the queue so that they can leverage it. And that's via the Manage Permissions here. You can also manage the notifications that get sent out. And then another important piece about our queues is this part called Assignee Security. And so if we click on Assignee Security, this is where we can set up the permissioning for the tasks. And by enabling Assignee Security, what this means is that when a user opens up this App Studio app in the Task and Queue Center, they're only going to be able to see the tasks that are assigned to them. If this is unclicked, they're going to be able to see all the tasks, no matter who's the task is assigned to. So we're going to click on Enable Assignee Security, and then this Enable Creator Access will give the creator of the task access to see what's the progress and status and who's assigned to it. So in Assignee Security, we're going to click on both of these, and we're going to save it. And that's all we need to do in this section. We're going to jump back to our workflow here. So now we have a queue for our task to be assigned to. We're going to click on our search queue here, and you're going to see that queue that you've created should pop up here. If it doesn't, it might just take a second, so you can click out of here and reopen it, and it should pop up in just a second. And then once you select your queue, what you'll want to do is click Assign To. And this is going to determine who is assigned the task for completion. And we already figured that out, and it's going to be the person result.domoid. And here is my queue. And then we're going to click on this select form to configure a form for them to fill out. So this is where we get to determine or ask questions about what information we want them to fill out and answer about that task. With this form, we also want to provide information around details around the task. And so this first question that we're going to put in here is actually not a question at all, but is actually just background information about what the person being assigned this task is going to need to know about it. And so we're going to put in the field location. And right now it's wanting us, the user, to submit some sort of information for this question. And so what we're going to do instead is we're going to make this a non-required field, and we're going to adjust the advanced settings for this. We're going to change it to where it accepts an input. So we're going to give some sort of information. We're no longer going to provide an output, meaning that the person's not going to fill out the response to this. And we're going to make it read-only. So by doing this, we're no longer prompting the user for information, but instead they're going to be able to see some sort of info that we pass to them. And so we're going to pass that information via the input field and configuration here. And we're going to change this from user-defined to now variable-defined. And as you know, we have a variable in our workflow called location. And we're going to select that location as the data that we're passing through. So if we preview this, instead of responding to a question, the user will now see the location of the task that they're responsible for. Okay. We would then continue to fill out this information with the background, with the maintenance type, and with the priority. But due to time, we're just going to kind of skip through that and assume that we're filling out the background information for the task, and you can go back through and add that later. What we'll want to do is now add some sort of requested information from the user. So maybe it's going to be the start time that we talked about. And so we can create a question for submitting a start time, and we want to change that to a date time. And our data type to date time, we might add another question for end time, completion notes, and all of that. Once again, I'm just going to assume that we have, maybe you'll go back through and add these questions. We're going to keep this fairly simple for now. So we have our location, which is passed through in those notes. We're going to add a number of different questions that we want them to fill out. And by doing so, when we save this, those responses are now saved to a new variable. So we have the start time, which is now saved as a variable. And now we want to update. So at this point, the user has completed the task. We've collected that information, and we want to update our data set again. So similar to what we did up above with creating the AppDB document and syncing the collection, we're going to want to update our AppDB with our new information. So what we're going to do here is we're going to define a function, and it's going to be an automated function once again, working with AppDB, so under our AppDB section. And instead of these functions at the top, we're going to use this update field component to update part of our AppDB collection. So here, we're going to wire up this task here with our collection ID. And our collection ID is stored in the document. And so it's going to be document.collectionID. The entity ID is going to be our document.id. And then our field is going to be the field in our AppDB collection that we configured. So we're going to create a custom value in here, and we're going to put in our start time. And if you remember, we put this in camel case, and we're going to save that. And then the value that should be submitted for start time is the variable that we just saved. So we're going to create a custom value here, and we're going to search for our start time variable that we just collected, and we're going to insert that as the value that should be written to AppDB. We'll create and map our result, and then we can add another function here to sync our collection. So if we wanted to, we can go in and define a function click on View More once again, AppDB, and at the very bottom, we have the sync collection, and we'll add this as our last function of our workflow. Once again, it should pre-fill. If it doesn't, it's going to be document.dataStoreID, and we'll just update our success parameter. Now, the last step of this is our ending. This is a really simple one to configure. We're going to go to our flow controls, and we're going to select the end workflow step. Okay, so if I zoom back out here, we can see the full workflow. We're collecting user input. We're finding the person responsible, writing data to our data storage, and then we assign that task out to our individual. And when the individual has completed the task, we're writing that data and finishing our workflow. We now have completed this. At the top right, we can come down here and click on Deploy. There should be a couple review validation. This is just more so informational, nothing that's going to stop the workflow from working. And we can then deploy our workflow. So congrats, everyone. We've created a workflow to automate this whole process. Now is the fun part where we get to build this front end and add this to our App Studio app. So if we now, to quickly wrap up here, move over to our App Studio, you can click on the orange Create App button, and it's going to prompt you to select a theme. You can choose any theme you want. I'm just going to choose the classic theme here. And in our workflow, in our App Studio builder, there is this plus section where you can add elements and actions. And to build this app, we're going to drag out our workflow. And so here it will want us to select the workflow that we just created. And what you'll see is we now have our start form that triggers this workflow. And then underneath it, we can drag out our queue. And dragging out this queue, we'll see the one that we just created as well. And we'll save this app. So now we have these two tools on our App Studio app. And what should happen here is now if I put in a location, so we'll say North Building, maintenance type is cleaning services, and our priority is low. When we submit this, in just a second, we will then have our task end up in our tasking queue center that's wired up here. So I want to wrap up. I know we're coming up on the hour mark. To review what we've built, we have now built a solution that leverages App Studio as a really functionable and actionable front end. We've got tools to have data capture via Domo Forms and AppDB. We've got automated assignments via Task and Queue Center and workflows. Alerts and notifications are going to be sent out when a user is assigned a task. And something we haven't touched on yet, but was shown in the demo, is that all this data is being stored in that Domo data set in your instance, and you can then build downstream reporting and analytics, which is extremely powerful and gives leaders and managers insights into how their teams are performing. So congratulations, that was a lot jam-packed into an hour session. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. You can always come back. This video is going to be recorded, and you can follow back along. And if you got stuck, go back and see where you got stuck and how we can get you fixed. But I encourage you to continue working with these tools, and feel free to try to build on top of the solution that we created here today.
Riley, thank you so much for taking your time. I know we are up against the hour. Lots of great feedback in the chat about maybe extending these to 90 minutes, finding ways to maybe pause and let people catch up. Please understand, obviously, we try to cram these in an hour very specifically and strategically, but we are 100% open to that feedback. And maybe we do extend these because we did a lot of people joining. Tom says, thank you, Riley. It was super helpful. We have lots of thank yous coming in on the chat. B-Rad, our friend from the community, thanks, Riley. Valerie here, thanks. So lots of folks really enjoyed the content. As always, as Riley said, all of these sessions are recorded and placed the exact same link that got you here to watch the event. So literally when we click end this stream, you'll be able to refresh and you should be able to see that recording. I believe it's instantaneous. You can also follow along on all of our social media channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the Twitter X. We would love to see you there as well. If you haven't joined the community, all of our past events are in our past events page on the community. All of those links are in the chat for this session. So you should be able to find those as well. We did have a few people that are like, I'm a little lost here. Go back and watch the recording. Or reach out to Riley, reach out to Dan, reach out to myself. Make sure we connect you with the right people. That's part of what their team does, is to help you in this advanced customer enablement to be able to do some more hands-on stuff, some more personalized one-to-one, and help you build these tools together. As we mentioned at the start, if you have an opportunity, register for our next session coming up on January 30th, 2 p.m. Mountain, where Dan Hendrickson is going to deep dive into all things bespoke AI-enabled experiences, some really cool real-world examples on how top companies deliver tailored experiences. That registration is live, and the link to register is also in the chat. Thank you, Riley. Thank you, ACE team. Thank you, Domo, for allowing us to do this with the community, the AI and data products platform. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We will see you on January 30th for the next Advanced Customer Enablement Hands-On. Thanks again, Riley.
Thanks.